Skeleton gardening, everybody. Well, I do my best to start on time each time we go live, and I realized that even though I sit here and say 7:30 p.m. Central Time, I get confused. I actually was doing a live stream with somebody. It's about 2 years ago now, and I almost missed the entire thing because I showed up an hour late thinking that I was actually. Anyway, I know time zones can be a little bit of a pain, but for those of you that stuck around, we appreciate you. Looks like we got about 12 people in, and definitely go ahead and start chatting things up. Tonight is a really interesting night, I think. I got lots of great photos from the community dealing with garden pests, garden helpers. It's really, really cool. And I'm already seeing a bunch of people here in the chat talking. Hello to Sparks, YouTube user Charlie's in here, Ani, Blue Wolf, April, AJ, Don, Tim. There's so many people I'm already seeing here. I really appreciate your being here tonight. A little bit different in some ways than some of the other live streams, in part because the community is going to play such a big role, I hope, in providing advice. I've done a ton of research leading into tonight's conversation about garden pests, garden helpers, but I think experience trumps research many times because there are all kinds of things that seem like they're the ideal way to approach something, but then when you see it actually play out, the experience and seeing what works and doesn't, I think is absolutely fantastic. So keep leaving comments in the chat. I'm seeing some people that I haven't even seen in here before necessarily, although I recognize some of you for sure. We've got South Louisiana in here. We've got some frigid Maryland in here from the Adirondack Mountains. Puts me of a mind of our Adirondack blue and Adirondack red potatoes. Absolutely fantastic. I absolutely love seeing folks in here. I tell you what, tonight we're going to go ahead and get started with something that's not quite on topic, but there are a couple of people who sent us some photos that I really wanted to share tonight. And so I'm going to share this as well with you, and then we're going to get into our topic at hand. So let's go ahead and lay out our presentation tonight. A really fancy photo we have going on here. This is actually from two different individuals, and we're going to take a look at that in a little bit. But first and foremost, I wanted to say thank you to Carrie Jo. She's one of the folks that won a green stalk from us last year, and she sent me a couple of photos today showing us some of the lettuce. Let's see, she has lettuce, oregano, and strawberries planted and growing in her green stalk that she won. And I want to say how much we appreciate anyone who's won in the past coming in and sending us photos of the things that they've won. That is such a wonderful thing to do. We love to follow up on what you're growing whenever you've won something from us. So congratulations to Carrie Jo, and thank you. And AJ, thank you so much. AJ's Green Topics has been with us, I want to say, since the beginning of our channel. Thank you for the super sticker. That is so kind. It's a wonderful way to support our channel. We appreciate that. AJ's Green Topics definitely has a channel as well, so you can go check him out. He has a wide and varied contents, including gardening as well. So thank you so much. We have, yes, Carrie Jo, I would agree. Very pretty layout here. And Ashley, who actually won, here, I'll put it so that my picture is not in the way, one of our green stalk seed starter kits our last giveaway, sent us a picture of when that showed up as well. She chose the black ones, whereas we have the green ones, but they look so nice. So thank you for sharing that with us. And Elaine reached out and showed us the grow tent. She said this is the best production so far, but her grow tent potatoes, and I got to say, you can't go wrong with some grow tent potatoes one bit. We appreciate you sharing that with us. I love potatoes grown indoors and outdoors, but I'll take the indoor potatoes just about any time. We've done that as well. I think the ones we had the most success with in terms of indoor potatoes were the purple Viking. They came out so nice, looking so good. But those growth tent potatoes are fantastic. That's a good question. I am not sure if I believe Elaine is here tonight. Elaine, this is the question that Tim just asked, which is that sawdust in those pots? And I can't quite tell because of the lights there. But if you're in the chat and you want to respond to Tim, that would be fantastic. Okay, got a couple other photos. I don't want to rush through them, but I think this is super cool. I'm going to hide myself again. Patrice, aka I Want to Believe on YouTube, said, I was growing outdoors until January 1st. I think around January 1st. I don't even know what the temperature was here, but I don't want to think about it too much. She says, when I repotted everything and put it in my heated pop-up greenhouse because snow was coming, and we ended up with an unusual 15 inches of snow and ice that lasted a month and a half in zone 7A. Yeah, I would say that sounds pretty unusual. 15 inches as well. The lowest temperature was 1 degree Fahrenheit. I couldn't reach the greenhouse for the majority of the time, but at the end of February, I'm pleased that I lost only a few and the majority survived. So she just shared this with me, and I want you to check this out. First of all, the heated pop-up greenhouse, that's such a cool idea. Let's take a look at the plants inside. The plants inside that are looking really nice. I like how you call this the survivors. These are, hey, majority of everything looks like it survived. Nice green coloration as well. I tell you, the brassicas are super, super hardy. It seems like they look absolutely wonderful. You are all set. Let me go back to she's going to be laying these out or planting these out very soon. We really appreciate you sharing those with us. Those are awesome photos. And you know what is so interesting? I think I have, you see that blue bucket on the left-hand side? It's broken down just a little bit. I think I have that exact bucket that we've been growing in for 4 or 5 years. They still grow just fine, no matter, and mine's doing the exact same thing. But I love it. I absolutely love it. Some of it, yep. And this is I Want to Believe, as she said, I Want to Believe. That's the same person. Said some of it's getting planted out this week. Very nice. I agree, Tim. Very nice. Everything's looking great. And hey, you can't go wrong with those plants that you can get done early. We're still a little ways away, maybe a couple weeks, 3 weeks or so away from planting some of our vegetables. But I got to be honest with you. Recently, we've had a couple of days where it's actually been a little bit warmer here. Now, today was not the case. It's about 21, but a little bit warmer, making me think I want to get some stuff going. I just got to be careful because that's not when our last frost date is. We're not there yet. And Tim, who is definitely in the chat tonight. Let's see. Hold on one second, Tim. Let me go back because Elaine is here. I want to just focus in on this. Elaine just commented, this is red Pontiac, and now there's purple magic molly planted now. Yeah, you can't go wrong with the purple magic molly. That is absolutely fantastic. It's my personal favorite. So there we go. Tim says, it is too cold for pollinators yet in zone 7, but I have started many flowers, zinnias, marigolds, and impatiens. Zinnias, a personal favorite of ours, certainly to attract pollinators, and marigolds. If you've ever grown marigolds or researched it, you probably understand that marigolds have a lot of purposes besides actually being quite a beautiful flower when it comes to pests and other problems in the garden. As for pests, maybe because I have a greenhouse now and I'm not growing inside anymore, I have not yet seen any pests, gnats, or aphids. Although one of my tricks for gnats is a bit of cinnamon on the soil before the plants germinate. Additionally, I keep the soil not too wet. Now this is interesting to me. I want to pop myself up on the screen here real quick. No one actually sent me any pictures of the gnats, which I was looking for a picture of my own with gnats, and I couldn't find. I have some pictures of my stuff in here too, but I couldn't find one that was good enough. But I think that secondary tip in particular is so important when it comes to when we get like fungus gnats, etc., inside. A lot of times it's when we have too much moisture on top, especially with our seedlings or when we're starting seeds. And so bottom watering is incredibly helpful. And I have not tried the cinnamon on the soil, but I have heard that tip before. So I think that's an interesting one to give a try too. For aphids and gnats, a bit of apple cider vinegar and Dawn dish soap in a small container, and I leave it in the corner of the growing racks. Absolutely, absolutely, I have done that before. I have the dish soap helps them to sink down. That's what I understand about it. It's just like what some of the tips and tricks for some of the other insects that you're going to see. It breaks the surface tension, I believe. But we've definitely used cider vinegar to attract the gnats. It's been especially a problem at times when we've had tomatoes inside that we didn't get to right away. That's when we often have to deal with those problems upstairs. With not just gnats in that case, when dealing with, we call them sour flies, but fruit flies too. Also, mix 1 part hydrogen peroxide to 2 parts water and bottom water the trays. This will generate both oxygen for the roots, but also kill any insect larvae or eggs in the soil. That is so interesting. I haven't tried the hydrogen peroxide, but I've also heard that as well. Oh, and by the way, Elaine did mention the secondary answer to the question about the whether or not we're talking about shavings or wood shavings, that she used livestock wood shavings bedding. That's so interesting. I've never tried that before. That's so interesting. Well, we're going to talk a little bit about ladybugs, I want to believe. So we'll get there in just a little bit. But I just saw this. The ladybugs do have I'm actually going to show you proof that they do help with aphids. But let's take a look at some of the pictures that Tim sent us. So Tim, I believe in the upper left-hand corner, we got some rosemary growing in there. Some plants that have been cut way back. Is that peppers there on the right in the upper side there? I want to say, Tim. And then, one of my favorite things here is the picture on the right-hand side here, because I think you can make a humidity dome pretty easily out of saran wrap, or I've even used gallon storage bags in the garden. I think that's a great tip to keep things nice and damp if you're looking for a humidity dome, but you don't have something that is going to fit over top of something this big. So you got a oops, that's the wrong one. You got a tray here that's too big for a humidity dome. I don't know, maybe they have some like this big, but if you don't want to pay for it, you can just do something just like this. So yes, I was right. Those are overwintering potatoes or overwintering peppers, excuse me. Over here. Yeah, that's what I thought. Really nice. Why not? They can live for quite some time. Absolutely. And I love this. The jackery here, the energy source, the portable energy source to keep the light on here on this particular dome. Fantastic. And I've already said this. I said this at the previous video, but I think Tim's greenhouse setup is one of the coolest. I would love to have something like that. It's absolutely fantastic. So thank you so much for sharing those photos with us. We're just about to get into our topic at hand tonight. But if you have photos of your garden that you would like to share with us, you can email those photos to gutengardening@gmail.com. And I'm going to give you a preview of our next live stream topic right now, and I'll remind you of it at the end. But the next live stream topic is going to be on gardening oddities. And so what I mean by that would be vegetables, fruits, other things that are doing odd things. And I was actually inspired by something that was emailed to me today. And I decided not to put it in this presentation because it seemed like such a good idea for a future live stream, because there are all kinds of things that happen when you see the seeds sprouting inside of a tomato or a pepper growing inside a pepper. There's so many different oddities that happen in the garden. I would love to get some photos from our community of some strange things that you've experienced, some strange occurrences. And so if you have something, if that brings something to mind for you, you can share that at gutengardening@gmail.com. And quite frankly, if there's something else in your garden that you'd like us to show, you can email us that as well. one of the things I'll say, and we do have a Twilight Gardener. You just asked the question about praying mantises. We're going to actually have a praying mantis picture here tonight because somebody sent us one. One of the things I wanted to say, I've been trying to do the live streams a little more regularly. There was a span of time of over a year in between live streams, and now I've done a couple in a row. One of my main concerns is making sure that the content is something that's actually useful. It's not just, I mean, I want it to be engaging, I want it to be interesting, but I also want it to be useful for you. I don't like wasting time. As a teacher, I don't like wasting my students' time. So I try to present things that are actually meaningful to you. And I really hope that that is something that you're going to get from these presentations. And I hope you like this format of sharing your photos in addition to my content as well, because I think that's something that I think it's a valuable piece to allow your content here so that we can all benefit from what you're doing and your knowledge. So anyway, let me not talk on this too much longer because that goes back to the waste of time. But let's talk about our purpose. Our purpose, our end goal in gardening is food. I mean, that's the primary reason. Yes, there's beauty as well, but here at gutengardening, it's the production of food. So I have a couple of pictures here that I've used for some of our thumbnails where we've had a bigger harvest and we've gathered it together. And it's not to make anyone jealous or anything like that. It's to focus in on how this is where we need to get to, but there are barriers that are often in the way. And the barriers that are often in the way, or the challenges that we face, are the pests, the garden pests, the voles, the other pests that exist out there, and we have some helpers as well. And so we have that understanding that there's this battle that we're going through in a way in the garden that we can't even sometimes see. Now there are some of the critters that are out there are bigger, and we'll talk about those today and from the pictures you sent. But a lot of what we're doing, a lot of the work that's happening happens on the micro level, or at the very least on a level where we have to look under leaves. We have to look closely to see what's going on before it's too late. Because this is what we want. We want a green, luscious garden. This is a picture of our place from a couple of years ago. And you can see the plants, everything growing so nicely. And one of the things about gardening that's so interesting to me is as you get closer to the process of gardening, you look closer in here. I mean, from a distance, this looks perfect, but you can imagine all the things that are going to war beneath the surface. And I want to take a look at some of those. So we're going to take a look at what you all shared. And this is where I'm going to ask you all to be as involved as possible, laying out hints, laying out ideas, laying out tips so I can focus in on this as well. And we're going to start with our first pest of the day from Charlie, who's definitely in the chat right now. Charlie's in Zone 7B, New York. And the first picture is stink bugs. And I'm pretty sure I saw Blue Wolf say some of the things that these, well, according to some people, the ugly praying mantises attacking, and this is one of them, stink bugs. So first of all, if you've experienced or had any experience working with or dealing with or struggling with stink bugs, let us know that in the chat. You can throw a little me in the chat if you struggle with stink bugs, because I will tell you, we have been fortunate that they haven't been so pervasive. We've actually dealt more with another bug that looks very similar to this, and I'll show you a little bit later. That's the squash bug. They're not the same bug, even though they look pretty similar. But that is the stink bug. And they do smell bad. Now, here's an interesting thing about stink bugs. Let me take a look at this. More struggles with stink bugs coming in the house than outside. Interesting. Well, stink bugs can definitely impact your garden. They are actually, when I think about stink bugs and think about what I've dealt with them, one of the biggest tips that I heard, and you can tell me if you've experienced this as well, is that they actually, I don't know, I think this is ironic. They don't like strong smelling plants. That's what I've read. And so if you have alliums like your garlic and onion, there are like a lavender type plant that they tend to go away from that. I even read, now I've never done this, but I even read that some essential oils like clove helps to keep them away because they don't like those stronger smells. Yeah, Tim says garlic powder and water in a spray, and also lavender. Yeah, so that makes sense there. And lavender is so beautiful anyway, and smells so good. AJ says we had them in Texas, but not in Iowa. Knock on wood. You know what? We haven't dealt with them inside here. I've seen them outside, as I said. When it comes to dealing with them, though, once they've already come in, I think one of the things that I found for us anyway, and you know, you can say that this is probably true for a lot of the pests. They're big enough that dealing with them by hand, I should have said this earlier. I'm not going to suggest anything tonight that is pesticide based. The closest I'll come to that is say that we've used diatomaceous earth at times. But I'm not going to say, I'm not going to push any kind of pesticide or anything like that. So the best approach that I've seen for us anyway is soapy water, and to go out and knock them off the plants. They say that early morning is when they are more sluggish, which makes sense to me, I think, with a lot of insects, but just soapy water, knocking them in, helps to get rid of them. I actually have something I'm going to show you a little bit later for the Colorado potato beetle. That is also potentially a way that you could handle these stink bugs as well. What did I just see here? Viola said, I just had one in my water kettle yesterday. Yeah, that would freak me out a little bit too. I don't love that at all. Hey, one of the ways that you can recognize the stink bug, though, and there are different varieties, of course, but this triangular shape on the back. It's got a rounded back, but a triangular shape. The squash bug that I'm going to show you a little bit later has a smaller triangular shape than this one. That's why our chat is so good. Yeah, I know. The mornings can be a little bit of a sluggish time, Sheila. That's fantastic. Well, one of the other things that has been suggested in dealing with these is that you always need to keep an eye out for the eggs. And that's going to be true with a lot of these beetles in general. A lot of the eggs are hidden underneath the leaves. And so if you start seeing squash bugs around, then you definitely want to check on the undersides of the leaves, because if they're laying eggs and those eggs hatch, it's not long before you're really looking at massive numbers. And so I think that's an important thing to keep in mind too. Just keep an eye on your plants. And I think that's it's easier said than done, especially when you have a smaller garden space. Maybe it's a little bit easier. You get the bigger garden space, it's not exactly the easiest to always keep an eye on everything, but you start seeing them, start looking for the underside. I would say the underside of the leaves of plants. And I wanted to say one more thing. We haven't really done anything with neem oil, so I'd love some comments down there in the right-hand side, or in the right-hand side, my right-hand side, in the chat, if you would. If you've had some experience, if you've worked with neem oil or used neem oil before, I think the neem oil element is, I've seen it. A lot of people have suggested it in terms of impacting the life cycle of these plants, but we've never used it. My understanding is that neem oil is natural. It's not something that's going to harm your plant, just in general. Blue Wolf says neem oil works great for you, and so that's something that we want to maybe take into consideration. Has to be pure, close to pure. I don't know if there's a particular brand or type of neem oil, or a brand of neem oil that would work the best. Again, I haven't done anything with neem oil, but I have seen it. I have seen it in Home Depot. I've seen it in other places. JST Country Girl says, I don't like it. It stinks and makes everything sticky and messy. Okay. See, so some people love it. Some people don't. That's good to know that there's a smell associated with it. And Blue Wolf says it needs to be cold pressed. Again, this is where I hope you're reading the chat as it's happening. And thank you all as you're putting stuff in the chat. By the way, if you haven't hit the like button, please go ahead and do that. We'd love to get even more people in here. But it needs to be cold pressed. That's good to know. Tim says dilute it a lot. Maybe that helps. Neem oil is good, but you have to put it on at night and not in the hot sun because it will cook it in the sun. That's interesting. I've seen that when it comes to powdery mildew as well. Some people use like a milk treatment to try to treat that, and the time of day makes a lot of difference as well. I've heard for that too. Very good. Charlie says you need cold pressed neem oil, Captain Jack's Neem Max. That might be if that's the brand. Charlie, thank you for the suggestion for a brand. Again, some of these things I don't have any experience with, so that's where you're coming in handy for sure. And I'm going to move on to aphids because, boy, have we got some good stuff with aphids here. And I can't believe I just said that. The good stuff with aphids. Maybe that's not actually a possibility because I don't like aphids, but we've got some interesting information with regard to aphids. And as I move on in the conversation, you keep chatting with the things you need to chat about as you're solving the problems and having conversations like we were just talking about with neem oil. Keep it going because all that's great information. But aphids are really interesting to me because they're one of those creatures. I keep calling them creatures. I guess they're one of those creatures that when they start out, it seems like it's not a really big problem because they're tiny. And they don't at first seem to be doing a ton of damage. They will definitely damage, especially your younger plants, but then they spread like crazy. The aphids, I don't know if I've ever seen anything quite as prolifically ready to spread as aphids. They suck the sap out of leaves. They cause yellowing, stunted growth. The leaves curl. I mean, you can see when they take over, you put your hand down. I think this is a really good point. You put your hand there, you rub it up against the leaf that has aphids on it. You're going to come away with stuff crawling all over. They are absolutely awful, in my opinion. And somebody commented earlier, and I guess this is how bad my memory is, but somebody commented earlier about how, they brought in ladybugs to deal with this. And we're going to talk about those ladybugs and whether or not they're effective. But first, I got to show you this video. So we have a couple of shorts, and you can tell this is an older short because this is from when we were still gutengardening, and that's been a couple of years. But we have some ants farming aphids for their honeydew. So the honeydew is the sticky like substance that the aphids develop as they're feeding, and the ants really like it. It provides some nutrition for them. So they farm it. So I'm going to show you. Oh, that's good to know, Charlie. I didn't realize that. That's good to know that the pics are from a friend's garden plot. Yes, perfect. But I'm going to show you really quickly now this video. It's a very short video, and I have it on mute so that I can talk about it. But you got to look closely. I'm going to make it full screen. You see all those ants up there? That's actually on top of our Hosui Asian pear. That's when it was a couple years ago when it was younger. And you see the ants and you see all the aphids in there. Those ants sometimes they call it herding them, but the ants are actually farming those aphids because it's like a symbiotic relationship. Now, they did not stay on there for much longer after this video because, they're right there on the apical end of this plant, and I wanted that tree to keep growing. But you see that? I'll pull it right there. Let me find a good spot. If there's a good spot. It's kind of gross, to be honest with you, but right in there. You see all the aphids there and the ants farming them. I don't know if any of you have ever seen that before. If you have, you can let me know in the comments. But where you have aphids, you'll often find ants, and the ants will. Yes, that's exactly right. In my research about this, I read that the ants will actually move them around to better feeding areas. I don't really love that, to be honest with you. So when we think about this, I'm going to move this back to where we were. So a lot of times we look at treatments for our aphids. And one thing you can do with aphids, because they are soft-bellied creatures, you can use diatomaceous earth. Diatomaceous earth is interesting because it can have a negative effect on ladybugs and on ladybug larvae. So mixing it together can be a little bit of a challenge. And it's also not great outdoors when it rains because it washes it right off. I guess the positive benefit of diatomaceous earth is that it's not going to be harmful to what you're growing in the garden. It's just little tiny microorganisms. So that can be helpful. But the ladybugs, and there are other insects as well that make a big difference against aphids. Charlie says, and this is a great point, Charlie, the best plant to see aphids work together are peony plants. I have 100% seen that before. They really attract them in, and ants certainly. But here you see the ladybug larva, which sometimes I think of as the most alien, to me, one of the most alien looking creatures out there. And the question is, will those ladybug larvae, will the ladybugs actually take care of your aphid problem for you? And I can't speak to everyone because I know I just read earlier somebody didn't have success with it, but I do have a little bit of proof from our end of our ladybugs taking care of business. This is a picture from our lemon, and you can see the ladybug, and you see the one of the reasons I wanted this particular picture. You see those. That's a really nice, I think, close-up image of the aphids there. This one doesn't have the ladybug eating, but I can tell you that the larvae of the ladybug actually consume more, from our experience, consume more aphids than the adult. And so I want to show you this. Now, if you're squeamish at watching a ladybug larva eat an aphid, you might want to look away, but take a look at this. Doesn't this thing look wild? That's the ladybug larva. This is from our indoor growing area. And so as soon as they hatch out of their eggs, they start feeding. This one is eating one up right there. You can see it going to town. There were some other ladybugs in the back. There you go. See, it's eating it right up. That is the ladybug larva eating. It's so cool. And some ladybugs there too. So cool. I mean, just absolutely a menace to the aphids. And that's really necessary if you think about it, because those aphids, again, you see a few of them. Our experience has always been you see a few aphids and they are going to be taking over everything. They reproduce so quickly. So a couple of things we've done. One, spray of water helps if the plant is firm enough, a nice spray of water across the plant to wash it off. But the ladybugs have been most helpful. In the comments, what has been your best defense against aphids? If you've had to deal with aphids, what has been your best defense? Let us know that in the comments. We would love to see what you've done. I mean, I'm going to have another picture here shortly of somebody who sent a ladybug. You'll see that in a second. It's not quite in the exact order, but I mean, what do you do when you see this in the garden? Yes, washing it off is great. The problem that we found too is once you have them, it's pretty hard to get rid of them permanently. This year, one of the things that I've done in order to do this, to help with this indoors, is I replaced some of our raised bed in particular. I replaced some of the mix that was in there. I took out a lot of what was there that I was thinking probably every year we'd start off fine, and then all of a sudden it would creep back in. So this year I didn't bring in anything from outdoors. I replaced some of the mix, and we've been really fortunate. There have been none right now. Yeah. So that's one of the most important things that we've done. So I see some people here talking about water spray. I want to believe says was to the best defense was to bake the soil. The idea of sterilizing the soil. Absolutely. I see spraying with water from Anne. Water spray, Dr. Bronner's, and I don't know too much about that, Anna. You'd have to tell me more about that. Neem oil solution, hard spraying, on established plants. Only on established plants. You don't want to wreck your little ones. Some good companion planting, and then that apple cider vinegar mix. I think I'm really going to have to try working through that even more as I see that in the future. We've released ladybugs in our indoor growing area, and it's been fine. We've been able to keep them in that area. I know some people would be hesitant to do that as well. Charlie says, strong hit with water from the hose, just keep spraying. The hardest ones to get off is the oleander aphid from our milkweed plants. Yeah, we're going to have some pictures of, well, I don't want to spoil too much in the future, but we're going to have some pictures of some insects or some caterpillars that like the milkweed plants. And those oleander aphids apparently aren't too big of an impediment to other creatures that like the milkweed, but they can be if they overtake everything. And I can see how that would be problematic for sure. The peppermint liquid, soap liquid. Oh, interesting. Very cool. I'll have to look into that. Thank you. All right. Now we're moving into an area where I don't know as much as I would like, but I spent more time than I thought possible today researching this beetle. If you've seen this type of beetle before, let us know in the comments. This one is so interesting. First of all, this is the eyed click beetle. And apparently click beetles are a pretty big family. But this particular beetle, from what I read, can be between 1 to 2 inches long. And the reason it's called a click beetle is because if it's rolled on its back and it needs to turn over, it pops itself in a way that makes a clicking sound. And Blue Wolf says, I believe wireworms are from click beetles. And so in my research today, what I found was that this particular one, the eyed click beetle, is a little different in that the larva is apparently, and I'm just going to read this to you. The larva of this particular variety eats insect larvae, including wood-boring beetles and flies. You often find it in dead wood. But this family is so big that other click beetles are actually quite harmful, or can be quite harmful, the larvae in particular, to garden plants. So this one in particular seems to be a little bit more on the neutral side of things, not necessarily killing the insects. The larvae that it kills are not necessarily overly harmful, but it still deals with that, versus the other members of this family, which are apparently a little bit worse to deal with in the garden, especially the larvae. So you're absolutely right. The wireworms are. The fact that this is 1 to 2 inches long, I mean, that's a substantially sized beetle, in my opinion. And I would agree with you, AJ. I think it does look kind of fake at first, doesn't it? Those eyes there are intentional, apparently developed to scare off predators and other, I guess, other things that might want to do it harm. But it does look like an alien a little bit. Well, let's see what else I found. It says that with other click beetles, the wireworms can be problematic as they can attack especially younger plants, but they can eat a lot. The larvae or the wireworms are an orangish looking, to me anyway, it looks like an orangish color, like something you wouldn't want to see either. I don't really like those, but they spend 2 to 5 years of its life as that larva. And so if it's the harmful one and you have these, that's going to be problematic, I think, just in general. Again, I don't know any more than that about this. This is the first time I'd ever seen this beetle before. Certainly haven't seen it in our garden, but I found that to be very interesting. So thank you so much for sharing that alien-like creature. So maybe this is more alien-like than the ladybug larva. I don't know. All right. This one is the biggest one. I think this is the biggest creature that came my way in the emails that I received. And I had to show this. This one actually just came in. This is red-tailed hawk. And I'm going to forewarn you, I'm not going to leave it on the screen very long, the next picture that I'm going to show you, just because maybe some of you are a little bit more sensitive to this type of thing. So I'm going to forewarn you before I show you. One of the reasons why red-tailed hawks are amazing, and Charlie is going to tell you that that's his friend. And I think Charlie said in his message to me that this red-tailed hawk is so comfortable with him now that he can get within about 5 feet of him. I think that's so cool. I would just look at how smart this bird looks. But what he said was, or what you should know about red-tailed hawks, they are native to Wisconsin for sure, where I am. In fact, it's the most populous bird of this type, apparently, in the state. And it takes care of some of the bigger rodent problems that we have. Now, I'm not 100% sure how you would attract a hawk. I kind of think it's the luck. I kind of think you have to be lucky a little bit. But one of our big problems here has been things like voles and mice. So the next picture I'm going to show you is going to be this red-tailed hawk capturing one of those. So if you're squeamish, look away for a little bit. But the power of this bird and how it can help in the garden is really nice. Now, I was just going to point out something that Tim pointed out here as well. The one thing about it is, if you have your own small animals, free-range quail, you do have to be a little bit more careful in this regard because they are powerful. I'm not kidding about that. If your primary issue, though, is you don't have the small animals running around and you're dealing with voles like we are, moles, etc., that is something that this red tail can bring to the table. It can really get in there and help with that. And as somebody who has dealt with so much loss in our garden due to both rabbits and voles, and I don't have anything outside right now that I'd be worried about, I would invite one to come to town. Rodents can also carry some other diseases with it. So if it can help to limit the population of those those rodents, I think that would be fantastic. Oh, and we got some conversation about chicken hawks. Chicken hawks. That makes me think of an old Looney Tunes cartoon about chicken hawks. Anyway, all right. Jen sent us this picture of a ladybug on snapdragons. And one thing I didn't mention, and this is kind of interesting because snapdragons aren't necessarily known to bring in ladybugs, although there are other pollinators that will definitely do that. Snapdragons definitely help to bring in bees and butterflies. But I didn't talk about this too much, but you can really help take care of ladybugs by planting really good high pollen type plants, type flowers to bring them in or keep them in. Yeah, you know exactly what I'm talking about, AJ. It's nice when people know what I'm talking about. I appreciate this. I appreciate that very much. But ladybugs, So yeah, ladybugs are animals that you can actually help to take care of. You can leave some water out for them. We've done that before too. A little dish with some marbles in it so they don't drown. Place for them to land. But they're pretty good about coming back, and we've seen more and more of them in recent years. I think the more pollinators we have had, the better. And here is what I promised earlier. Apparently, a garden helper, for the most part, although they do kill some of our bees, among other things, from what I understand. I haven't seen that so much, but that's one of the things I understand about them. But this is a beautiful, lovely, not alien-like at all, praying mantis. Um, I've read now that you can buy the praying mantis eggs and release them in your garden. I've never done that before, but I do know that the praying mantis will consume a whole bunch of other garden pests. I mean, they're powerful enough they can take out grasshoppers, which is pretty impressive in my opinion. So something to take out grasshoppers, definitely aphids, cabbage worms. And nobody sent me any pictures of cabbage worms, and I didn't include them, the little loopers and things like that. But yeah, you buy egg sacs for these if you want to release them in your garden, if this is something that interests you. I'm pretty sure I remember the first time I saw a praying mantis was on the side of the school I attended when I was in elementary school. I think the teacher brought us outside because one of them was climbing on the wall. Yeah, I want to believe, they really do have that alien. It's the shape of the head. It's the shape of everything, really, isn't it? Yeah. These praying mantises do look like they're ready for whatever might come their way, and apparently they are. They do hunt whatever they can catch, though, and so that's where some of the helpful insects might deal with them as well. But they do hunt whatever they can catch, and so a lot, it's like ladybugs. From what I've seen, typically deal with aphids, but this means that the praying mantis it's multi. It will attack multi-species. I guess that's a good way to look at it. And I wasn't going to mention this, so I won't mention it, but I'll leave it on the screen just for a little bit, and then I'll move away from it. But that's a true element. But I don't want to scare people away from praying mantises because that's a piece of what they do. One thing, if you want to attract praying mantises, they do like taller bushes. They like taller plants. For example, where we live, right behind us, we have a marshland area. So it's a better area maybe to attract them in. I have not ever purchased anything. I do not know the answer to this. That's a great question. You know what? I don't know. It shouldn't be that hard. Male praying mantis. I just looked it up. A male praying mantis, here, I'll pull your question back up on the screen, is significantly smaller than a female praying mantis with a larger number of abdominal segments and larger wings, while females are larger and have a rounder abdomen. And the females are often known to practice cannibalism. So there you go. The one being eaten is the male. Yes. Charlie, I didn't know this. Some praying mantises can eat hummingbirds. That is wild. Oh, I missed that. Tim says, I attract them with marigolds and other herbs. Yeah, marigolds can do a world. I said that at the beginning. I think marigolds are I don't know, could they be one of the more powerful plants in the garden? I think that's highly possible. Absolutely. Fantastic. And so Susan, who shared this with us, says, my green stalks were pretty much pest-free last year. he or she was on a pepper plant. Yeah, you can see the pepper leaf right underneath that. Must have done a pretty good job. Fantastic. And great question, AJ. I like that question. All right, let's see what else we've got here. We've got Sabby, who shared this snail. Oh. Now, snails are interesting. Snails and slugs. I didn't actually have anybody mention slugs this time around, but I think there's some similarities there. For those of you who have had to deal with snails or slugs, what is your go-to? Yes, I don't know if this particular one is edible or not. I saw somebody say yum. So the thing about this one is that my understanding is that you can actually use a barrier type technique. And I am going to mention something that that Tim is talking here. The barrier type technique would be something like diatomaceous earth. And I've also read you can crush up like finely ground eggshells to create a barrier, because as they're crawling across, they'll avoid that rougher surface. I've read the beer can trick where you're filling up to a point some container, a container of some kind, and they crawl in and essentially drown. I've read that as well. I know that I don't know anything about snail bait in particular. I know that they like certain plants more. They love the leafy greens. I know they love cabbage. I mean, you see that all the time with slugs. For those of you who have never grown cabbage before, if you're unfortunate enough to get slugs, they crawl into the inner sections of leaves. And so you could think that you've peeled down everything and you have this beautiful head of cabbage. And then underneath the next layer, you could find some slugs at the bottom. That has definitely something that's happened to me before. This in particular, though, we have not had to deal with so much. We've been really fortunate. I've actually seen more snails here, or not snails, more slugs here in the last 2 years than I've seen previously. And again, targeting our brassicas in particular, especially our cabbage. That's been the number one. So we've got Ani saying beer works great, but some say it attracts them from a distance. Yeah, I'm going to show the Japanese beetle toward the end here tonight, just briefly. And one of the things that people often put together are the traps, like the Japanese beetle traps. And I think you have to have a much bigger property for something like that. Not much bigger, but a bigger property so that you can put it at the edge, because you are going to attract some of them in. And so, yeah, I wonder about that as well. Snail bait to a degree. Yeah, the Japanese beetles, that's a hard one. And I'll talk about that shortly. I think the Japanese beetles are going to be an important one to talk about. Kevin shared with us the tomato hornworm. I doubled it up. Double your pleasure, double your fun. The first time I ever saw a tomato hornworm, I was shocked at the size of it. I didn't even know the best way to describe why it was so shocking, but maybe it had something to do with how fast it eats. I think this is one of those pests that you could watch for a few minutes and it would like within a span of a few hours, it can consume and destroy an entire tomato plant. It's been absolutely miserable for me in the past, in the few times that I've dealt with it. And I'm very thankful that I haven't dealt with it more than I have. So this eventually becomes a hawk moth. And here, let's see. We actually saw this last time. Natalie shared with us on the last live stream that I did, the brackenid wasp eggs, the wasp that comes in and essentially eats this critter from the inside out and lays its eggs, and then the eggs appear on the exterior. I do know, and we're going to see some chickens a little bit later. So I guess we might have a few other critters that are just as big as that hawk. But I know that chickens love these, and that's one of the ways chickens can help in the garden for sure. Chickens love to eat these. They come along and will, I mean, within a few seconds. And I know Twilight Gardener, I believe, has some chickens around. And so, yeah, they love the hornworms. What I've done for this when I've seen it is to hand pick them right off as soon as I see them. We actually took one, picked it, and it turned into a, what do you call it? The chrysalis stage, but we didn't go any farther than that with it. We just ended up, it didn't hatch. It didn't, you call it. We just wanted to see what the end result was after we took it off the plant. But I mean, these things are massive. They do say that if you have a black light, you can see them. They glow a little bit under a black light. That's what I've heard. Let's see. I had a hornworm. Lisa says I had a hornworm almost completely defoliate a 4-foot tall tree, tomato plant rather, in 24 hours. Yeah, that makes perfect sense to me. Tim says neem oil and companion planting with basil. Charlie says, if you see something looks like rice on the hornworm, leave it alone. They're the good guys. Yeah, these wasps hatch, go after them. This is absolutely fantastic. It's not something that you want to deal with. I want to believe says I have 5 hens myself. I'd say the hard thing about this, with this type of a pest, is just how quickly it can destroy plants. A lot of those other ones, you have what seems to be a little bit more leeway in terms of time to put a stop to things, to really prevent them from doing any more damage. This one, it's just so fast. YouTube user says, I picked mine off and threw them to the wild turkeys. Absolutely. Whatever wants to eat them, so that they don't eat our stuff. Absolutely. All right, Crimson sent us a picture of grasshoppers. Now, grasshoppers, I have not had. We've seen some. They have not caused us problems in the garden so far. But my understanding with grasshoppers is, and I did a little bit more research today, my understanding with grasshoppers is that, one, they can eat through floating row covers. They can bite through it if there are enough of them. That's what I've heard. And so, whereas with some pests, you can put row covers over vegetables to protect them, that might not be the case for grasshoppers. Can you let me know in the comments if that's something that you agree with? Again, since we haven't had to deal with this so much, this is more of a research-based answer to this question, and I don't want to say something that's not accurate. I have read that they live in that nymph stage, which if they don't have wings, they're a little bit smaller. They should be in the nymph stage. They can live there for a couple of months, and that's when they're usually eating the smaller green, the green plants, the smaller plants like grasses, lettuces, carrots, etc., the carrot greens. And so in researching about it, it says that one way to deal with these is like a lot of other of the pests, and I haven't really mentioned it too much tonight, but that is to grow some sort of trap crops for them. So a lot of these pests can be dealt with if you have space with trap crops. You find trap crops that they're attracted to. So maybe that's part of the battle in dealing with some of these pests, is finding out what they're most attracted to. Give them a little bit of that to keep them from your main crops. When it comes to the grasshoppers, though, it says that the things that will attack them, things like birds, the praying mantis can actually take out some grasshoppers, but that becomes a little bit of a problem. But chickens, guinea hens, turkeys, they like to eat them as well. And I want to say that if there are enough of them, you could probably end up having a big problem. But again, this is an area that I haven't really focused in on, other than to say I did my research today. I also read that neem oil can be something to deter or slow down grasshoppers. And the best way it says to get rid of them is if you can hand pick them off or catch them. But I'll be honest with you, when I was a kid, I did not have a problem. I would catch grasshoppers left and right. I'd be running through the fields trying to catch grasshoppers. Nowadays, I don't really have that desire to be going out and grabbing grasshoppers for some reason. I don't know why that is. But thank you, Crimson, for sharing these grasshoppers with us. All right, we are on to the caterpillar stage. Oh, Tim, you just said this comment, grasshopper's a great fish bait. Yes, I did do some fishing with grasshoppers back in the day when I was much younger. So I definitely know what you're talking about. So Lisa sent us swallowtail caterpillars. And this is so interesting. Actually, she told me there were 6 here to see if I could find all 6 in this picture. If you look closely, I see 5. I don't know. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I don't know where the 6th one is. Maybe I cut it off in the picture. I'm not sure. But the swallowtail caterpillar is interesting. I guess like a lot of caterpillars, there's this baseline of understanding that they're going to cause maybe some potential problems, but then in the end, they're going to be good for the garden. And so this is like at one stage, they're not as good. At the other stage, they're much better for you. So I'm going to read what Lisa said about this. It says this. She said this: I had some carrots that were in the ground too long. That's these carrots. So they started to get woody, but I left them. And as you can see, a whole family of caterpillars took up residence. There are 6. Can you find them all? Those guys munched away for a week or so and then became swallowtail butterflies, which are beautiful pollinators flitting around my garden. And so you can end up being invaded with the caterpillars initially, but they are actually, according to my research, better pollinators than some other butterflies out there, even better than the monarch is in terms of a pollinator. It says it can be bad for the garden in the sense that they eat leaves of certain plants like dill, parsley, and fennel, but since they turn into swallowtails, eventually they're more beneficial. So it's generally not a problem. So if you could have some dill or parsley or fennel, it sounds like as a sort of trap garden for these butterflies, the end result seems like it's going to be better off than maybe the initial challenge of dealing with them, from what I understand. Let's see. I think this is also going to be true to some extent of the monarch caterpillars, except that in my research, it didn't seem like that the monarch caterpillars were as good for whatever reason at pollinating. But the monarch caterpillars, I mean, they're only going to be feeding on one thing. And I would say that for those of us who are blessed with milkweed, and for whatever reason, we got a ton of it that grows behind our house, we see the monarch caterpillars an awful lot. And I read a quotation about the monarch caterpillar, monarch butterfly, that I thought was really interesting. And this is what it was. And again, this is part of the research I was doing today. It said this: monarchs are considered a flagship species for all pollinators. Creating habitat for monarchs benefits other pollinator species by providing nectar and host plants. So the idea that it's maybe not the best pollinator overall, but that it's actually more like a signal, a flagship signal of the health of the area. I thought that was really interesting. There it is. So I thought that was really interesting in terms of the rationale behind why you might want these in the area as well. I will also say, though, when I say we have milkweed, that milkweed is coming back and back and back, and we do see a whole bunch of aphids on the milkweed in our area. So that's not exactly ideal. Derry, welcome, Derry. Derry says The swallowtail butterfly is a beautiful butterfly. You are absolutely right. I love both the butterflies, but I love butterflies in general. I remember we went to Florida a year or so ago, and my younger daughter had some butterflies landing on her, and she wasn't too keen on that. It was sitting in her hand. She wasn't too keen on it. I imagine as she gets older, it'd be better. But yeah, you're right, Don. There's so many aphids on the milkweed. They seem to absolutely love it. All right. You see one of my absolute favorites here, and that is bees. I absolutely love bees. When I was younger, I did not understand bees. I did not love bees the way I do now. You also see Morgan the macaw in the background, apparently a macaw that eats pizza, from what I've been told. I was looking up ways that a macaw might help in the garden, and the only video I could find about it was a macaw that was that was looking around, nodding as people were doing work. So I thought that was pretty funny, but it's kind of fun, a fun picture to have in the background. So the bees that we have here are so incredibly valuable. Dawn, who shared this with us, says she guards the bee. Hey, that's a great task right there. The bees pollinate. Last I looked, something like 100 plus varieties of vegetables, fruits and vegetables. Can you imagine what or how difficult it would be to grow successfully if we didn't have that? I mean, the work that they're doing. The bees are absolutely phenomenal. They're absolutely an essential part of what we do. I think we have another picture of a bee here. I love this picture. Look at the picture on the left here of the bee. You know, as a result of this, as a result of bees and what you, I mean, this is the reason why we started growing more pollinator plants or pollinator attracting plants. Zinnia is a great one. One of my personal favorites, the garlic chives, really attracts pollinators. But we did this to bring them into our garden because they're such hard workers. And I love going out June, July, and you're hearing the buzzing around. It's so important. And I see people talking about some of the bees that they're raising for pollinators. Blue Wolf says leafcutter bees. Ani says mason bees. That's absolutely wonderful. Those are so important in what we're doing. In addition to the bees, you see that cute frog on the right-hand side there? Actually, I don't know. Did that frog have a name? I wasn't sure. I didn't see a name for the frog in the list that you sent me. But I went down this rabbit hole of researching about frogs in the garden and how they can be beneficial. And not only are frogs beneficial as creatures that eat slugs and snails and mosquitoes and grasshoppers, among other things. Not only that, but toads. And I threw a picture of a toad that we dug out that scared me in a harvest I was doing. We have a video of the 15 potato varieties in a long raised bed. And I was reaching in thinking I was getting a potato, and I did not. But they're even better in the garden, apparently. Yeah, Tim O'Dwyer, they're in my research, they're absolutely supposed to be fantastic in the garden in what they eat. And my research said that frogs are great, toads are even better. They can eat thousands of insects in a singular season. And I'm going to go back to this picture because Don has said that this frog needs a name. And so I would offer up the opportunity to those of you in the chat to suggest some names for this beautiful little frog here. Apparently, though, when it comes to toads, frogs need more water. Toads are well suited because damp soil, but they don't need as much water as frogs. So that's one thing. They don't require a lot of maintenance. They just don't like to be disturbed too much. You let them do their thing. And I hadn't even thought about this. I hadn't even thought about this at all. But where I found this was burrowed into the soil. And if it's burrowed into the soil, it's breaking up soil as it's digging around. Now, obviously, that's on a really small scale, but it's loosening up the earth as well. I thought that was really cool. So we've had lots and lots of frogs and toads around our area. We have some marsh-like area behind us, so we have plenty of these. And Don says they love green stalks. That's good to know. They love climbing into green stalks. Absolutely, why not? That's fantastic. Yeah, I see lots of names. So you find one that you like, Don. You should maybe choose the name if you get the chance. All right, these are the ladies that Don shared with us. The ladies and the guinea fowl that you have here. You had names listed on it, but I wasn't sure who was who, so I didn't want to mess that up for you. But chickens can be incredible members of the gardening community. Not only are they providing eggs if they're hens, not only are they providing waste, which is absolutely phenomenal. Some people, I've heard people just throwing the waste right on, or letting the waste go right into the garden. I believe you're supposed to compost it, but you do you. But they also are great at eating the stuff that we've already talked about, the hornworms, grasshoppers, among other things. I mean, they will take care of a lot of pests, a lot of the things that you pull out of the garden and throw their way. They're absolutely phenomenal addition to the garden, and I wish that we had the ability to have some ourselves here, an easier ability. I think I've mentioned this in previous lives and previous videos before, but we could have 4 at most in my area, legally have 4 at most in our area, and no roosters. So 4 hens, but we would have to dedicate specific enclosed space to them, and it's just not something we're going to do. Okay, so in the left we have sweet and sour. In the middle is al fresco, and nugget is on the right, and then there's another one named sandwich. I Want to Believe says, I give my bad leaves, especially with bugs, to mine. I'm going to show you a bad leaf here in just a little bit. You'll see exactly what I'm talking about. You'll know exactly what I'm talking about. But I'm going to end it with Homer the pig on this from this particular part of the video. We still have more stuff. Don't worry. But I just love this pig so much. And I was looking up, because I've not done anything with pigs in the past, how do pigs impact the garden? Well, it makes sense that you get manure, natural fertilizer from the pigs. I absolutely know that. When I was in high school, our cross-country course, and I was a cross-country runner, but our cross-country course went by this farm that had a manure pit from pigs. And they would pump that pit about once or twice a season. And right when we had a home meet, we considered that our home field advantage, because I will tell you what, if they weren't used to the smell, that was a smell. But they absolutely will eat your leftover waste. So you're wasting less, because that's then transferring into the waste that you need to put back into the garden. And I've also read that they will help clean up larger areas in terms of the plants that you might not want growing around. But I think these are absolutely fantastic. Yeah, Don says he helps with fertilizing. Absolutely. I love the name, Homer the pig. I had a friend who had a pet potbelly pig when I was younger. I remember going over to his house, and this pig was just roaming around like he owned the place. That's fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing those photos. I absolutely love it. I do want to show you some of the critters around our place as we're wrapping up tonight. I don't want to keep you too late, but I think it's been beneficial, and I wanted to show a few things that didn't come up. I should mention that I did get a photo. I didn't have time to get into the presentation. Somebody said to me, sent me a photo that says, actually, let me just go over here and read it. It's from Sheila, who said her most challenging outdoor garden pest were squirrels, which is fantastic. I'm sorry I didn't get that into the video. And then she had a picture of her cat as her most challenging indoor garden pest. Yeah, I can imagine that they sometimes run amok. So I understand that. These are our red wrigglers. We have had these in our indoor vermiculture setup for going on 4 years now. Actually, the very first video we ever did on YouTube was about making a vermiculture setup. And so these are red wrigglers. They're absolutely fantastic. I think one of my favorite things to have, we've had it indoors for 4 years, but they're just constantly at work. And whether we're talking about night crawlers, which tend to be a little bit deeper, like the larger worms, or worms just like this, they are making a massive difference in the garden. Massive difference all around when it comes to, we'll take food scraps, throw them into the bins. They're just hard at work making some of the best product out there for us. That best product is, I mean, look at these worm castings from our worms, which are amazing additions. And if you think about it, outdoors, I mean, I don't ever buy worms if I go fishing with my younger daughter, who loves to go fishing with me. We just go out and dig some out of the garden. I don't, you know, we have so many worms out there. They're doing such good work. One of the statistics I read about worms is that they can turn over. I don't want to say something that's not true. Let me give you the exact number. Oh, I don't have it. I didn't actually write it down, but it's something like 6 inches of topsoil every. Oh, see, I should have written it down. I don't remember the exact time period. It wasn't. I don't think it was every year. It was every couple of years. It was 6 inches of topsoil that they're turning over, just really improving the tilth of the soil. They're such an important part, in my opinion, of the garden. So I wanted to show those as garden helpers. They're so easy to take care of too. If you haven't checked out any of our videos about the vermiculture setup, I highly recommend it. Again, we have it inside. There's no smell to it or anything like that. But they're just constantly doing work. They're taking care of our scraps. They love the rotting organic material that we're putting in there, and they're producing this black gold, this wonderful worm castings. And if you've ever tried to buy worm castings, you'll understand why they might also be so valuable. On the other side, we have some critters around here that we've dealt with that I absolutely despise. The squash vine borer grub. If you've ever dealt with a squash vine borer, it is eventually a moth, so it's not like the squash bug. But these things come in, yeah, good fish bait, I would agree. But man, they rip plants apart. This is so, I don't know, this is maybe the grossest picture I think I have tonight. This is the inside of a squash plant. It's a summer squash plant. And that's 3 different squash vine borers. They're just in there doing their thing. Oh, Sheila, I'm sorry I couldn't get Francis up the picture up there. I couldn't get into the presentation at time, but I appreciate it as well. But yeah, we did a video where we did an autopsy of a squash plant, and you could just see the devastation. You know, we talk about the hornworm and how quickly that just can tear down a plant. Well, to be fair, you could have a summer squash plant that looks good one day and the next day it looks dead too. As this one, once they get inside there, you can do a little bit of surgery to remove them. You can try to protect the plant and keep it alive a little bit longer, but they just, oh man, they're just destructive. It's absolutely awful. That one in particular, the squash vine borer, is the reason why we often, if we're going to grow summer squash, we're going to have some new plants ready to go, you know, started a couple weeks later, just in case any of those are destroyed. So we have some to keep going. And Tim says they destroy pumpkins as well. Yeah, they'll get in any of those plants. And yeah, it's incredibly gross. And it's unfortunately a problem for our summer squash. The summer squash, and we're talking the yellow summer squash, patty pans, zucchini, it doesn't really matter. They can be highly problematic all around. So you got to keep an eye out for them, and you got to keep an eye out for like any kind of breaks in the surface Some people, one of the things we've done to try to prevent this in the past is wrapped a little bit of aluminum foil around the stem. I'm not sure how beneficial that has been, but it's something that, just to try to create a little bit of a barrier. Once we see things starting to show up. Again, I'm not 100% sure that that's been the most beneficial. You may have seen this one before. This is from off of one of our plants out here, a cucumber beetle. Yep, the cucumber beetle will come in. We've seen them all over, not just cucumbers. I know they're called cucumber beetles, but all over cucumbers, all over melons. Really getting in. You often find them in the leaf, not the leaf, in the flower, the blossom. That's where we found a lot of them. And once we've got them, these are insects that we can handle a little bit with some diatomaceous earth, but just like a lot of the other ones, coming out, you see them, knock them off by hand. Tim, I'm going to go back. I'm going to go back one slide simply because, I'll go back 2 slides so it's not as gross. Tim says, I try to bury some of the vine further down where the damage is. That's really good, an interesting idea. Yeah, that's really interesting. Does tinfoil around the base actually work? So, Don, I didn't even see that question. So thank you for mentioning that. Again, it seemed like the year that we did that in particular that I'm thinking of, it seemed like the plants lived longer. I actually did a little bit of surgery, and they still produced a few more. But again, I don't know how much help it was, but it seemed to be somewhat of a deterrent. So, in that it does, but you cannot cover everything. Yeah, and that's the problem. It's a matter of trying to cover everything. Yeah, I would agree. Yeah, I like that. So this is something we would try in the future as well. Bury that part of the squash plant. That's so interesting. Such a good point. I'm going too far. Sorry. The cucumber beetle can be a problem. This is not something we've dealt with until 2 years ago was the first time we were dealing with cucumber beetles at our community garden spot. They are everywhere. This year in particular, they were really aggressive against our winter squash in particular for whatever reason. Squash bugs. All right. I did a whole video on squash bugs. I said, when you have squash bugs, you've got to squash them quickly. So if I could go back quickly, but it'd be kind of difficult. You see a little different shape, a smaller triangle with the squash bug here versus the stink bug. The squash bugs in general, though, are so aggressive. Let's take a look. They lay eggs so quickly, and then they just grow and grow. And you can see they eat, neat, tear up our plants. And one of the things, just like a lot of the other insects out there, a lot of the other pests out there, you really have to keep an eye out for the underside of your leaves once you start seeing things like squash bugs. And literally what we did with the squash bugs was to come along and squish them. They were not great. But Crash Kid says, jumping spiders and assassin bugs will take out young squash bugs. I did not know that. That is very interesting. Thank you. We've just mostly gone through the process of removing those leaves, and it's not exactly something you want to do with the squash plants because it leaves that opening when you remove the leaves. But I'd rather get rid of them than to have them spread everywhere. I imagine that this is something that you could feed to if you have some chickens or guinea fowl as well. You could probably be feeding them. I want to believe says last year for her that this was it was a bad year for bugs. I don't know. I would say that we had different pests than in previous years. I was a little bit worried because 2 years ago we had the Colorado potato beetle, which I'm going to show you next. I believe that's next. And this year this past season I saw one, and I thought we were going to have a problem, and we didn't. So I don't know. It depends on the bug and the year, I guess. The one I hate is the Mexican bean beetle. I tell all the gardeners, get cheap black garbage bags and put the plant or whatever plant that is infested and put it in the dumpster. Oh, interesting. I don't know much about that. I'll have to look into the Mexican bean beetle. I'm going to say, fortunately, I haven't had to deal with it. What I have had to deal with in recent years only, and not before recent years, it seems like the longer we garden in this area, the longer that's uh, the more pests that come to play, or the Colorado potato beetles. And as somebody who grows a lot of potatoes, you don't like to see it. Actually, this is not on a potato plant, if you can tell what kind of plant that is. But this is just a picture from our garden of the potato beetle. YouTube user says, I had all your potato beetles. I'm not going to wish that on anybody. We went to a spot a little bit north of here. It's a UW garden type area, University of Wisconsin gardening type area, and they had a potato plant that was covered in potato beetles. It was absolutely gross. The larvae look awful too. This is from one of our videos. This is inside the bucket as I was getting the larvae off the plants. What I did for this to get the larvae off the plants, though, you could squish them with your fingers. Absolutely, you will end up with yellow fingers for sure. You can. This is one of the things I was going to suggest. You can definitely plant some trap crops for them. Supposedly they love tomatillos. That's what I've heard. And so that would attract them more than the rest of your plants, which is very good. Tim says, I go out and hand pick them off and put them in a plastic bottle. The soap with the water, let them drop in soap with water. Absolutely. Let me show you what I did. And I saw this on a YouTube video somewhere at some point. That is the end of a broom handle there on the left, and I'm just gently sweeping them into a bucket, and it worked really, really well. And I had to be, again, gentle, and it was a soft broom, but gently sweeping them into a bucket. My understanding is the insect cover should be fine. One of the things I noticed, I won't go any farther in that direction. I think the insect cover would be helpful. If somebody has different advice or if you've had different experience, let me know. I did use some diatomaceous earth to help out with this, which did help out quite a bit, actually, with the larvae. Not once they become adults, though. So you have to get them at the larva stage for that to help out. It didn't impact. I think we caught them early enough. It didn't impact the productivity of our crop. I was really worried about that for sure. But definitely picking them off by hand, or in my case, as I said, sweeping them off by hand was really helpful and really a useful way to attack them. I don't even bother growing the potatoes at the community garden because there are so many, and I'm not putting anything else on there other than maybe some DE. And I don't get out there often enough to constantly lay on the DE or whatever I would need to do to keep them growing healthily. I can't deal with that. So I'm just trying to keep them away from my garden if at all possible. I like the idea of using something like tomatillos as a trap crop. I think that's a good idea. All right. This is the last picture of the night coming from me. And this is one of my least favorite. I mean, aphids are up there. There's so many pests out there, but Japanese beetles just annoy me so much. I don't know if you feel the same way about it. But these are beans, in case you can't tell, because there's holes all through it. They're brown. They're all different colors. These are beans. The Japanese beetles just lay in there so quickly. And I'm going to say that for the last 2 years, we've been really fortunate that they have been far, far fewer than in previous years. And I want it to stay that way. This picture is from 3 years ago when they were everywhere. We use soapy water. I come out, I knock them in. Sometimes I get really angry and they're getting squished, but it's just a constant struggle. And I said this earlier, but they have those beetle traps, those Japanese beetle traps And if you have a small garden and you're putting it right in the middle of your garden area, it's going to attract so many Japanese beetles into your place that it's going to look like it's doing a great job because it's going to gather a whole bunch of them, but it's going to be calling them from it, calling, calling them from a distance. So my understanding is with the Japanese beetle traps, the best thing to do is if you have a little bit bigger property to place it away from your garden a good ways, and then maybe it'll be more effective at pulling them away from your garden area. But one time I've used them, I haven't used them since. I haven't used the Japanese beetle traps since. Personally, I'd rather go out, not invite any more Japanese beetles to the property. I'd rather go out and take care of them, soapy water. You got to have the soapy water to break the surface tension so that they sink down and drown, and just knock them off and try to get out there as frequently as I can. I mean, they're laying their eggs, they're in the ground anyway, and I don't know. I would just rather try to take care of them. Yeah, exactly. The larva loves grass lawns. The less lawn, the less beetles. So, I mean, hey, that's like a commercial for the way we've laid out our property, because truly there's a walking path through part of our property, but for the most part it's become garden space. And so I guess we're reducing in some ways, but even though I understand our neighbors aren't the same, maybe that's a little bit helpful. Yeah, you know what, I get it. And I think a lot of people still use it. It's hard for me to say you do this, you don't do this. And when it comes to things like 7, we don't use pesticides like that, certainly. And I get what you're saying. When you didn't know any better, you used it. It's effective stuff, but it's effective for a lot of things. So I think that's a part of for me, the learning process. Yeah, it's amazing how effective Dawn plus H2O is when it comes to so many of these. Oh, this is interesting. Sodium bicarbonate and neem oil mist spray at dusk. That's really interesting. You know what? One of the cool things about well, Charlie, I'm going to read this comment and then I'm going to come back to it. Give it to your neighbor all the way down the block. Let them have them all. Hey, especially if they're not growing vegetables, right? If they just want it there at their house, they can have them all. This is the cool thing about the chat tonight. You know, I've been able to pick out a whole bunch of comments, but not all of them, certainly. I have the ability to go back through at each of these areas where we've talked about different pests or different helpers and look at the comments that people have had and given, and we can look through and say, okay, let's try this. Let's try that. I really love that very much. And no, this is not a suggestion. This is a statement of something that happened in the past. Wow. The more you know, the more you learn. Let's put some, oh man, can you imagine arsenic and lead on tomato plants? Yeah, and actually, I was just talking about this in a recent video. Apparently, the plate material that was used at the in years past in the Victorian era, the tomatoes lying on there, would leach in some of the lead, and people would eat it and think it was causing them sickness. And you're right, tomatoes are a nightshade, and so the fact that it's a nightshade has some of the same resemblance to some of the other, like the poison or the deadly nightshade, means that it was already a problem, and then people started getting sick and not knowing why. It's a really interesting history, absolutely really interesting history behind all of this. I would say that I'm glad that we're alive when we are, when it comes to the knowledge about some of these things, for sure. All right, here's the deal. I'm going to put this one slide. There we go. I'm going to go back all the way back. Okay. We're going to go back through the beauty that was all of these amazing pictures that you sent my way. And I'm going to land on the screen that has our email address. First of all, I have to say thank you so much to everybody who came out tonight, who shared with us tonight. I can't tell you how much I appreciate your photos. I can't begin to tell you how much I appreciate your willingness to share your pictures with us from your gardening experiences. it's really nice to see what other people are doing. It's really nice to be able to have an opportunity to share out, I think, what our community is already doing and get this advice from each other. Our next live stream, I don't have a date picked out yet. It's either going to be the end of this month or in April. I want to do, again, garden oddities. I want to focus in on strange things that have come out of or experiences from your garden. I already have a couple of pictures now that were sent to me. And so I want to see how many I can get from you all. So if you have some other pictures you'd like to send our way, we'd really appreciate it. I really want this time to be as meaningful as possible. I didn't do a giveaway tonight. I know we get a larger crowd when I do giveaways, and I love doing giveaways, and I'm not saying I won't be. We'll definitely have some more giveaways in the future. But I hope this content is as engaging as I think it is. And it's made engaging because you're all there in the comments, chatting things up and sharing your information. So I really appreciate that. Again, our next live stream is going to be about garden oddities. I'm happy to continue. Well, thank you, Susan. I'm happy to continue researching as well. I absolutely love this part of the experience. And I'll be honest with you, I'm gonna show you one more thing real quick. I'm gonna go back to this photo right here. All right, here. I looked at this photo. I downloaded this photo today from a previous harvest, and I just got so excited about what's about to happen here as the temperatures warm up. So I'm really excited for that too. I love this experience of gardening. I love our community, and I appreciate you all so much for being a part of it. And if you don't have anything odd, that's okay. I'm sure we can come up with some pretty cool oddities out there, even oddly shaped vegetables. Who knows? All right, folks, I kept you for a long time tonight, over an hour and a half. Thank you so much for staying with me. Have a wonderful, wonderful evening, and we'll see you soon. Stay tuned for some more great content, okay? Take care, everybody. Have a good night. Thank you.